For decades, Billy Gibbons has looked like the simplest character in rock music: long beard, dark sunglasses, a worn guitar, and a sound that seems to come directly from the Texas highway. But beneath that familiar image is a much more layered story. Gibbons did not simply become the guitarist of ZZ Top. He helped create a musical identity that connected blues tradition, Texas culture, hard rock, and modern studio production without losing its personality. So what makes his legacy so difficult to define? And why does his influence reach far beyond the songs most people recognize? To understand that, you have to look past the beard and the famous riffs and follow the musical choices that shape his career. Gibbons grew up surrounded by music in Houston, Texas, and developed an early fascination with the guitar. His interests were shaped heavily by blues and rhythm-driven music, but he was never content to simply copy what came before him. He studied the sounds of earlier guitar players and began searching for ways to make those ideas feel personal. That instinct would become one of the defining characteristics of his career. When ZZ Top emerged in the early 1970s, Gibbons, Dusty Hill, and Frank Beard created something remarkably focused. The arrangements were often built around simple ideas, but the sound was much bigger than the number of musicians on stage suggested. Gibbons understood that a memorable guitar part did not need endless notes. Sometimes, one perfectly placed riff could carry an entire song. But that wasn't the full story. His greatest skill may have been his ability to make simplicity sound sophisticated. Gibbons could combine blues phrasing with heavy guitar tones, creating riffs that felt both traditional and completely modern. His playing had space, attitude, and rhythm. Every note seemed to have a reason for being there. As ZZ Top became internationally successful, the band's visual identity became almost as recognizable as its music. The beards, sunglasses, hot rods, and Texas imagery created a world around the songs. Gibbons understood something many musicians overlook: a great musical identity can become part of popular culture. The music was not separated from the image. They reinforced each other. What happened next changed everything. ZZ Top embraced new technology during the 1980s, incorporating synthesizers, electronic textures, and polished production into a sound that had originally been rooted in blues rock. For some listeners, this evolution was surprising. But Gibbons did not treat tradition as a rule that could never be changed. He treated it as a foundation. That decision is an important part of his complicated legacy. Gibbons became famous for preserving the spirit of blues while simultaneously moving away from the traditional idea of what blues-based rock should sound like. He proved that respecting musical history does not necessarily mean staying frozen in it. Few people noticed what this led to. Gibbons became influential not only because of the riffs he played, but because of the way he approached tone. His guitar sound became part of his identity. He showed generations of players that finding your own tone could be just as important as learning impressive techniques. His influence also extended beyond ZZ Top. Gibbons continued exploring different musical environments and working with musicians from various backgrounds. These collaborations revealed another side of his artistry: curiosity. Even after achieving enormous recognition, he remained interested in discovering new sounds. And perhaps that is where the complexity of his legacy becomes clearest. Billy Gibbons is often reduced to an image: the beard, the sunglasses, the Texas guitar legend. But the real story is much broader. He was a student of tradition who was never afraid to reshape it. He was a guitarist known for simplicity who understood extraordinary detail. His impact can still be heard whenever a guitarist chooses a memorable riff over unnecessary complexity, builds an identity around tone, or blends older musical traditions with contemporary ideas. Gibbons demonstrated that originality does not always require inventing something completely new. Sometimes it means taking familiar ingredients and arranging them in a way nobody else could quite reproduce. In the end, Billy Gibbons's legacy is complicated because it refuses to fit into a single category. He is a blues guitarist, a rock musician, a cultural icon, and a master of musical economy. His career shows that influence is not always about playing the fastest or the most technically demanding parts. Sometimes it is about knowing exactly what a song needs and having the confidence to leave everything else out. That may be the lasting lesson of Billy Gibbons. Behind the unmistakable appearance and legendary riffs was a musician who kept evolving while remaining connected to his roots. His story is not simply about where rock music came from. It is about how tradition can keep changing without disappearing. And perhaps that is why, decades later, one Gibbons riff can still sound immediately familiar and completely his own.